Didn't think much of it back then. I was a teenager, more focused on school friends and my part-time job. His new wife Isabella was nice enough, and we got along fine. What I didn't expect was gaining a stepbrother in the process. Liam. He was only a year older than me, tall and athletic with a confident charm that made him impossible to dislike from the beginning. He treated me more like a friend than a sibling, and our dynamic quickly settled into a mix of light-hearted teasing and genuine camaraderie. Now, 2 years later, we had grown closer. Then I could have imagined we weren't the stereotypical step-siblings who ignored each other or fought over trivial things. Instead, we shared inside jokes, helped each other out with schoolwork, and even spent time together when we didn't have to. When Liam suggested we spend a week at the family cabin as a break from the city and a chance to relax before the chaos of school began, I didn't think twice before agreeing the cabin itself was nestled in the woods by a tranquil lake far enough from civilization to feel like an escape, but close enough to a small town for supplies. It was a place full of childhood memories for Liam, but for me it was mostly new. I had been there only once before during the winter, and the frozen lake and snow-covered trees had painted a picture straight out of a P.O. postcard summer, though brought the cabin to life in a completely different way. Warm sunrises over the lake, the chirping of birds, and the inviting coolness of the water on the first night at the cabin. Everything was calm. We unpacked our things, grilled some burgers on the deck, and sat under the stars talking about nothing and everything. Liam had always been easy to talk to, his confidence balanced by an openness that made you feel like you could tell him anything by the time we went to bed. I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't experienced in a while. The next day was scorching, the kind of heat that makes the air feel heavy after spending most of the morning kayaking. On the lake, we decided to take it easy for the rest of the day. Liam suggested using the sauna, something he'd been excited about ever since our parents had it installed at the cabin earlier that year. I wasn't particularly into the idea. SAA always seemed more like an endurance test than a relaxing activity, but his enthusiasm was hard to resist. "Trust me," Liam said, slapping me on the back as we walked toward the sauna towels slung over our shoulders. "It's the best way to recover after a workout. You'll feel amazing afterward if you say so," I replied, rolling my eyes but smiling. His excitement was contagious, and despite my reservations, I found myself looking forward to the experience. The sauna was a small wooden structure tucked behind the cabin, its simple design blending seamlessly with the natural surroundings inside the air, was thick and hot, immediately making my skin prickle with sweat. We set our towels on the bench and sat down the wood. Warm beneath us, the silence was almost tangible, broken only by the occasional crackle of the sauna heater. "This is the life," Liam said, leaning back and closing his eyes. "No distractions, no stress, just peace." I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I agreed. The heat was intense, and I could already feel it making my heart race. But as the minutes passed, I began to relax. There was something calming about the stillness, the way the heat seemed to wrap around you like a blanket. For a while, we sat in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. After about 10 minutes, Liam broke the silence. "You know, this was always my favorite spot growing up." He said, his voice quieter than usual. "Whenever things got crazy at home, I'd come here and just breathe." I glanced at him, surprised by the sudden vulnerability. Liam wasn't the type to talk about his feelings openly, and hearing him share something so personal caught me off guard. I can see why I said, unsure of what else to say. "It's peaceful." He nodded, his eyes still closed. "Yeah, it's like the rest of the world disappears, and it's just you, and the heat clears your head." I looked away, focusing on the faint patterns in the wood paneling. The heat was starting to make me lightheaded, but I didn't want to leave yet. There was something about the moment, something quiet and intimate that made me want to stay without thinking. I blurted out, "Do you ever miss how things were before?" Liam opened his eyes, turning to look at me before our parents got married. I said, hesitating before all of this, he tilted his head, considering my question. Sometimes he admitted, but not in a bad way. I mean, change is always weird, right? But honestly, I think we got lucky. It could have been a disaster. But instead, we got along. I smiled faintly, nodding, yeah. I guess we did. The conversation hung in the air for a moment, the weight of it settling between us. I wasn't sure why I had asked the question or what kind of answer I had been expecting, but hearing Liam's response made me feel a strange sense of comfort. Like I wasn't alone in navigating the complexities of our blended family. The silence returned heavier this time, as if the sauna itself were holding its breath. I shifted slightly, the heat making my skin slick with sweat. Liam did the same, his arm brushing against mine as he adjusted his position. The contact was brief, but it sent a jolt through me, a spark of something I couldn't quite name. I glanced at him, but he didn't seem to notice. His eyes were closed again, his expression relaxed. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself it was just the heat playing tricks on me. But the moment lingered, refusing to fade away. As the minutes stretched on, the atmosphere in the sauna seemed to change. The air grew thicker, the heat more intense, and the silence between us felt charged with something unspoken. I couldn't explain it, but it was there, an undercurrent of tension that made my pulse quicken and my thoughts race. And then, as if sensing my unease, Liam opened his eyes and looked at me. His gaze was steady, his expression unreadable, and for a moment neither of us said a word. The heat pressed down on us, the silence stretching taut like a wire about to snap. "You okay?" he asked finally, his voice low. I nodded, though. My throat felt dry. "Yay, just hot." Liam smirked, his usual confidence returning. "That's the point, bro. You'll get used to it." But as he leaned back against the wall, his towel slipping slightly to reveal the sharp lines of his collarbone, I realized it wasn't the heat of the sauna that was making my heart race. It was him. The realization hit me like a wave crashing against the shore. Sudden and disorienting, I tried to push it aside, to chalk it up to the suffocating heat of the sauna, or the strange intimacy of the setting. But no matter how hard I tried to focus on anything else, the beads of sweat trailing down my arms, the faint creak of the wooden bench beneath me, I couldn't escape it. The feeling was there, undeniable and unshakable, filling the space between us like the thick, humid air. I shifted in my seat, suddenly hyper-aware of every movement, every breath. Liam, on the other hand, seemed completely at ease, leaning back against the wall with his eyes closed, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. His towel had slipped further, revealing more of his toned frame, and I found myself staring longer than I should have, my gaze lingering on the curve of his shoulders, the definition in his arms. What was wrong with me? This was Liam, my stepbrother, my friend. I'd never thought of him this way before, not even once. But now, sitting so close to him in the sweltering heat, it was like a switch had been flipped, and I couldn't turn it off. "Hey." Liam's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts, startling me. I looked up to find him watching me, a faint smirk tugging at the corners of his lips. "You're zoning out. You sure you're okay?" "Yeah," I said quickly, my voice coming out higher than I intended. I cleared my throat, trying to play it cool. "Just the heat. I guess it's intense." Liam chuckled, the sound low and warm, and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You'll get used to it," he said, his tone teasing. "Or maybe you're just not as tough as you think." I rolled my eyes, grateful for the distraction. Please, I could outlast you in here any day. Oh, is that a challenge? He asked, his grin widening. Maybe I shot back, trying to sound confident, despite the nervous energy buzzing under my skin. Liam leaned back again, his smirk never fading. All right. We'll see who taps out first, but I'm warning you, I don't give up easily. The playful banter eased some of the tension, and for a moment it felt like things were back to normal. But then Liam shifted again, his leg brushing against mine. As he adjusted his position, the contact was brief, fleeting, but it sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with the heat. I froze my breath, catching in my throat, and for a split second, I thought I saw something flicker in Liam's eyes, something I couldn't quite place. Relax, he said softly, his tone unexpectedly gentle. It's just us. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken meaning. I wanted to say something to deflect, to laugh it off, and pretend like everything was fine, but I couldn't. My voice felt trapped in my chest, and all I could do was nod, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. The silence stretched on the heat, wrapping around us like a cocoon. Liam's gaze lingered on me for a moment longer before he looked away, leaning his head back against the wall and closing his eyes again. But the air between us felt different now, charged electric, as if the room itself had come alive. I tried to focus on anything else, the grain of the wooden walls, the faint hiss of the sauna heater, but my attention kept drifting back to Liam, his relaxed posture, the way his towel hung loosely around his waist, the beads of sweat glistening on his skin. It was like I couldn't look away, no matter how hard I tried, and then, as if sensing my gaze, he opened his eyes and turned to me again. This time there was something in his expression that I couldn't ignore, a softness, an intensity that made my breath catch. You're really tense, he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. You need to loosen up. I'm fine, I said quickly, but the words felt hollow, unconvincing. Liam raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement in his eyes. You don't look fine. Come on, just relax. That's what this place is for. I forced a laugh, trying to shake off the weight of the moment. Easy for you to say, you're used to this. Exactly, he said, leaning forward slightly. So, take it from me. You're overthinking it. Just breathe. His words were simple, but there was a warmth to them that caught me off guard. I nodded, taking a deep breath and trying to focus on the steady rhythm of my breathing. But even as I closed my eyes and leaned back against the wall, I couldn't shake the awareness of him sitting so close to me, the heat of his presence almost as intense as the heat of the sauna itself. Minutes passed, or maybe it was longer. I couldn't tell. Time seemed to blur the lines between my thoughts and the world around me, fading, until all that was left was the steady sound of my breathing and the faint rustle of movement beside me. I didn't realize Liam had shifted closer until I felt the light brush of his shoulder against mine, the contact sending a jolt through me that made my eyes snap open. Sorry, he said, his voice low and smooth. Didn't mean to crowd you. It's fine, I said quickly, my voice barely steady, but as he moved to create more space, I found myself wishing he hadn't. The silence stretched on again, but this time it felt different, heavier, more charged. I could feel the tension building, a palpable energy that filled the small space and seemed to pulse. With every beat of my heart, it was like we were on the edge of something, teetering on the brink, and neither of us knew how to pull back. Liam, I started, my voice hesitant, but I didn't know what I was going to say. I didn't even know what I wanted to say. He turned to me, his gaze steady and searching. Yeah. I hesitated. The words caught in my throat, but before I could find the courage to speak, he shifted closer again, his hand resting lightly on my arm. The touch was soft, almost hesitant, but it sent a rush of heat through me that had nothing to do with the sauna you're shaking, he said quietly, his fingers brushing against my skin. You. Okay, I started to respond, but the words wouldn't come. All I could do was not OD, even though it wasn't the truth. His hand lingered for a moment longer before he pulled back, leaning against the wall again. But the tension in the air didn't fade. If anything, it only grew stronger, wrapping around us, like an invisible thread that neither of us could escape. Liam sat quietly, his gaze fixed on the opposite wall, but I could feel his presence like a weight pressing down on me every time I tried. To look away, my eyes would inevitably drift back to him. The slope of his shoulders, the curve of his jaw, the way the sweat clung to his skin, catching the dim light in a way that made him seem almost unreal. I didn't understand what was happening. To me, he's my stepbrother, the boy who'd been a part of my life for years. We'd shared countless laughs, arguments, and everything in between, but it had always been easy, uncomplicated now. Sitting here in the suffocating heat of the sauna, everything felt different. Unsteady danger. You're awfully quiet, Liam said suddenly, his voice breaking through the stillness like a pebble dropped into water. His tone was light teasing, but there was an undercurrent of curiosity, like he could sense the storm brewing inside me. I'm just thinking. I replied, my voice sounding far too small in the cramped space about what he asked. Turning to face me, his gaze was steady, searching, and it took everything in me not to look away. Nothing important, I said quickly, hoping to deflect. But Liam wasn't having it come on. He said, leaning forward slightly. You've been weird ever since we got in here. What's going on? I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. How could I possibly explain what I was feeling when I didn't even understand it myself? The words were there, caught somewhere between my racing thoughts and my tightening throat, but they refused to come out. It's just hot in here, I finally said. A week. Excuse that. Even I didn't believe I'm not used to it. Liam raised an eyebrow, a faint smirk tugging at the corners of his lips. You sure that's all it is? Yeah, I said too quickly. Of course, for a moment, he just looked at me, his expression unreadable. Then, without warning, he leaned back against the wall, stretching his arms out along the bench on either side of him. The movement was casual, almost lazy, but it felt deliberate, like he was testing the boundaries of the space between us. You're acting weird, he said, his tone light, but his eyes sharp. It's not like you. I forced a laugh, trying to play it off. Maybe. The heat's getting to me. Maybe. He said, his gaze lingering on me a moment longer before he looked away. But the smirk didn't leave his face, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew more than he was letting on. The minutes dragged by, each one stretching longer than the last. I tried to focus on the heat, the sound of the heater, anything that would keep my mind from spiraling, but every time I thought I'd managed to calm myself, Liam would shift, or his arm would brush against mine, and the tension would come rushing back stronger than ever. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. The room felt too small, the air too thick, and I needed to get out before I lost my mind. I stood up abruptly, my towel slipping slightly as I did, I think. I need some fresh air, I said, my voice shaky. Liam looked up at me, his expression unreadable for a moment. I thought he was going to say something, but then he just nodded, a hint of something I couldn't place, flickering in his eyes. Don't stay out too long, he said, his tone almost teasing. You might miss the best part. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just grabbed my towel, opened the door, and stepped out into the cool night air. The contrast was startling. The sudden rush of cold against my overheated skin, sending a shiver through me. I took a deep breath, the crisp of the night filling my lungs and clearing my head, if only slightly. The stars above were bright, their light reflecting off the still surface of the lake. And for a moment, I just stood, there letting the quiet of the night wash over me. But even out here, away from the suffocating heat of the sauna, I couldn't escape the thoughts swirling in my mind. Liam's voice echoed in my ears, his words playing over and over again like a loop. I couldn't break. I didn't know what he meant by the best part, but the way he'd said it, the way he looked at me, made my stomach twist, in a way I couldn't explain. I didn't know how long I stood there staring out at the lake and trying to make sense of the whirlwind inside me. But eventually the chill of the night became too much, and I knew I couldn't stay out here forever. With a deep breath, I turned back toward the sauna, my steps slow and deliberate. As I approached the door, the closer I got, the heavier the air seemed to grow, as if a tension from before had seeped into the very walls of the small wooden room. When I stepped inside, Liam was still sitting where I'd left him, his eyes closed and his head tilted back against the wall. But as the door clicked shut behind me, his eyes opened and he turned to look at me. Feeling better, he asked, his tone light, but his gaze heavy. "Yeah," I said quietly, moving to sit back down on the bench. "I just needed a breather." "Good," he said, leaning forward slightly, "because I think we should talk." I froze, my heart skipping a beat about what Liam's gaze didn't waver, his expression calm but unreadable about whatever's going on with you. "You've been acting different all night, and I want to know why." "There's nothing going on," I said quickly, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they sounded hollow. "Come on," Liam said, his voice softer now. "You can talk to me. You know that, right?" The sincerity in his tone caught me off guard, and for a moment, I considered telling him the truth about the thoughts I couldn't shake, the feelings I didn't understand. But the fear of what he might say, of how he might react, held me back. "I'm fine," I said instead, forcing a smile. Really, Liam studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a small shake of his head, he leaned back against the wall again. "All right," he said, his tone light, but his eyes still sharp. "If you say so." But the tension in the room didn't fade. If anything, it only grew stronger, wrapping around us like a second skin. And as I sat there, the heat of the sauna mixing with the heat of Liam's gaze, I realized that this was far from over. The air in the sauna felt suffocating as we sat in silence, the tension between Liam and me almost tangible. I could feel his eyes on me even as I stared straight ahead, trying to focus on the wooden slats of the wall, the rhythmic hiss of the heater, anything but him. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't ignore the weight of his presence beside me. "You know," Liam said, after what felt like an eternity, his voice breaking through the silence, "you're really bad at pretending nothing's wrong." I turned to him, my heart skipping a beat at the intensity in his gaze. "What are you talking about, you?" he said, simply leaning forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "You've been acting weird all night. You're not yourself. And I can tell something's bothering you." "I'm fine," I said quickly, the words coming out sharper than I intended. Really, Liam tilted, his head studying me with a faint smirk. "You're a terrible liar. You know that I'm not lying," I insisted. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they sounded hollow. "Okay," he said, sitting back and crossing his arms over his chest. If you say." So the silence that followed was deafening. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, my hands clammy against the towel wrapped around my waist. I wanted to say something to diffuse the tension, to change the subject, but my mind was a jumbled mess of thoughts and emotions I couldn't untangle. Finally, Liam broke the silence again, his voice softer this time. "You know, you can talk to me, right? Whatever it is, I'm not going to judge you. His words caught me off guard, and for a moment, I felt the urge to tell him everything to spill out the confusion, the fear, the inexplicable pull I felt toward him. But the thought of what he might say, of how he might react, stopped me. It's nothing, I said quietly, my gaze fixed on the floor. I promise, Liam sighed, and I could feel the disappointment radiating off him all right. He said, his tone resigned. If you're not ready to talk, I'll drop it. But you should know I'm here if you need me. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak the silence between us, stretched on heavy and unyielding, until finally Liam stood up. I'm going to grab some water, he said, his voice casual. You want anything? No, I'm good, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded and left the sauna, the door closing behind him. With a soft click as soon as he was gone, I let out a shaky breath, my hands trembling in my lap. The room suddenly felt too quiet, the absence of his presence amplifying the chaos in my mind. What was wrong with me? I ran a hand through my hair, the heat of the sauna doing nothing to calm the storm raging inside me. I needed to get a grip to push these thoughts aside and focus on what was important, keeping things normal, keeping our relationship intact. But as the minutes ticked by, and Liam didn't return, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were already changing, and no matter how hard I tried to deny it, a part of me didn't want them to go back to the way they were. When the door finally opened, I looked up expecting to see Liam, with a bottle of water in hand, but instead, he stood there, empty-handed, his gaze locked on mine with an intensity that made my breath catch Liam. I said, my voice trembling, "What's going on?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped inside and closed the door behind him, the sound of the latch clicking into place sending a shiver down my spine. The look in his eyes was unreadable, a mix of determination and something else I couldn't quite place. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, his voice low and steady, "and I don't think I can just sit here and pretend nothing's happening." I blinked, my heart racing. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, taking a step closer, "that I've noticed things too. The way you've been acting, the way you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention, and it's not just you. I've been feeling it too." My breath hitched, and I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. "Liam, I don't stop," he said gently, cutting me off. "Just stop pretending we're both adults. Here we can talk about this." I didn't know what to say. The words were stuck in my throat, tangled up with the emotions I'd been trying so hard to ignore. I wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong, but the look in his eyes told me he already knew the truth. I started, my voice shaking. "I don't know what's happening. I don't know why I feel this way." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming in the small space. "It's okay," he said softly. "You don't have to figure it out right now. But maybe we don't have to fight it either." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I wanted to say something to push him away, or pull him closer. But I was frozen, caught between fear and longing. And then before I could stop myself, I took a step forward, closing the distance between us. The air between us was electric, charged with everything we weren't saying, but couldn't ignore. I didn't know what would happen next, but in that moment, I didn't care. Because for the first time, I wasn't thinking about what was right or wrong. I was just thinking about him. The space between us vanished in an instant, the charged atmosphere of the sauna pulling us together like gravity. My heart raced, every instinct telling me to stop, to pull back. But I couldn't move. It felt as though time had frozen, and all I could focus on was Liam. his presence overwhelming his expression, unflinching. He reached out slowly, his hand hovering near my face, giving me a chance to move away, to stop whatever was about to happen. But I didn't. My breath hitched as his fingers brushed against my jaw, tentative and uncertain as though he was testing the waters. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, his voice low and careful. I nodded, my throat too tight. To speak, his hand lingered, the heat of his touch grounding me even as my mind spun with confusion and anticipation. This was wrong. I knew that, but the weight of that knowledge wasn't enough to pull me back. "You can tell me to stop," he said after a moment, his gaze searching mine. "I mean it, just say the word." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My body was frozen, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it, and then, as if pulled by an invisible force, I leaned in, just slightly closing the minuscule gap between us that was all the confirmation he needed. Liam's lips met mine in a soft, tentative kiss, his movement slow and careful, as though he was giving me every chance to pull away. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned into him, my hands gripping the towel around my waist. As I gave in to the moment, the heat of the sauna seemed to intensify the air, thick with the weight of what we were doing. His hands slid down to my shoulders, anchoring me in place as the kiss deepened. My mind was spinning a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't untangle. Guilt, fear, desire, but none of it seemed to matter in that moment. It wasn't just the kiss. It was the way he touched me, the way he seemed to read my every hesitation and adjust accordingly. It felt safe and terrifying all at once, like stepping off the edge of a cliff and hoping you'd land on solid ground. Eventually, we went even further. After a moment, he even turned me around, and it all happened. I can't go in detail, but I think you can imagine what happened in that sauna, as if I was not sweating enough, and he was too. But I didn't mind that. When we finally pulled apart, both of us were breathing heavily, the reality of what had just happened crashing down around us. Liam's hand still rested on my shoulders, his eyes glued on me. I don't know what to say, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to say anything," he replied, his voice just as soft. "I get it. This is complicated." Complicated is an understatement, I said with a weak laugh, trying to break the tension. Liam smiled faintly, his hands dropping to his sides as he took a small step back, giving me some space. "Yeah, you're probably right." For a moment, we just stood there, the silence between us, heavy but not uncomfortable. I didn't know what this meant, what would happen next. But I knew one thing for certain. Everything had changed. "We should probably head back," I said, finally breaking the silence. "Yeah," Liam agreed, though neither of us made a move to leave. It was as if we were both reluctant to step out of this moment, to return to the reality that waited outside the sauna. When we finally did leave, the cool air hit me like a splash of cold water, shocking me back to reality. The night was quiet, the stars scattered across the dark sky, and for a brief moment, everything felt normal again. But I knew better. Things between Liam and me would never be the same. As we walked back to the cabin, neither of us said a word. The silence was thick with unspoken thoughts and emotions. But it wasn't awkward. It was almost comforting. Like we both understood that words weren't enough to capture what had just happened when we reached the cabin. Liam paused at the door, glancing back at me with a hesitant expression. "You okay?" he asked again, his concern genuine. "Yeah," I said, with a small smile, I think. So he nodded, his lips curving into a faint smile of his own, before he opened the door and stepped inside. I followed him, my mind still racing as I tried to process everything that had happened. The cabin felt different now. Smaller, quieter, as though it too was holding its breath. As I climbed into bed that night, my thoughts were a tangled mess. I replayed the events of the evening over and over in my mind, dissecting every word, every touch, every glance. I didn't know what this meant for us, for our relationship, but I knew one thing for sure. I didn't regret it. And the next morning, the awkwardness I'd feared didn't come. Liam was his usual self-playful, sarcastic, and entirely too good at deflecting questions, if anything. He seemed more at ease than I was, as though he'd already accepted what had happened and moved on. But for me, it wasn't that simple. The memory of our kiss lingered in my mind, a constant reminder of the line we'd crossed. I didn't know how to move forward, how to navigate this new dynamic between us, but I knew I couldn't ignore it. As the days passed, things between us settled into a strange new normal. We didn't talk about the kiss, but it was always there, an unspoken presence that hovered between us. And while I still felt the weight of what we'd done, I couldn't deny the way my heart raced whenever Liam was near, the way my thoughts strayed to him, when I should have been focused on other things. It was messy and confusing and entirely unexpected, but it was ours. And for now, that was enough. At least, I think. So,